From family failure to CEO. My story of respect, redemption, and self-worth. You know how people say, family is everything? Mine used to say that, too, right before calling me the family disappointment. Hi, I'm Emily Carter, and this is the story of how a Christmas Eve dinner ruined my family's reputation and built my empire. If you've ever been underestimated, this one's for you. 4 years, I was the invisible daughter. My younger sister, Sarah, was the star, beautiful, charming, and according to my mother, born for success. Me. I was the creative one, which was Mom's polite way of saying, the one who never quite lived up to expectations. When I left home at 23 to start a small catering business, my parents laughed. Emily, catering isn't a real career, Mom had said. It's what bored housewives do for pocket money. I never argued. I just worked. Fast forward 8 years later. My company, Stellar Events, had 3 locations, 50 employees, and a growing list of luxury clients. But my family still thought I was between jobs. They had no idea that I'd quietly built a multi-million-dollar brand right under their noses. Then came the party. Every year, my parents hosted a lavish Christmas Eve dinner, Mom's signature event. This time, she bragged for weeks that Sarah's handling the PR and Emily will cook the meal. Except I wasn't cooking. I'd told her months ago I couldn't make it. I had a business trip and an important meeting scheduled for December 25th. She ignored that part. You'll find a way, Emily. You always do. I didn't. At 6:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve, while I was checking into a quiet hotel in Boston, my phone started buzzing. Sarah. Where are you? Sarah, Mom's losing it. The kitchen's empty. She's about to call Domino's. Sarah. Victoria Chen looks disgusted. Victoria Chen. That name made my heart skip. She was the CEO of Pinnacle Hospitality Group, the biggest luxury resort chain on the East Coast. The same woman I was meeting for dinner the next night to finalize a $2 million partnership. By 9:33 p.m., the last message came in from Sarah. Party's over. Everyone left early. Victoria Chen didn't even stay for dessert. Mom says you're dead to her. I set my phone down, ordered room service, and whispered to myself, in 3 hours, I'll be having dinner with Victoria Chen. Let's see if she recognizes the last name. The next day, I arrived early for our meeting at Pinnacle Resort. I wore my best tailored suit, confidence polished as carefully as my presentation deck. When Victoria walked in, she looked elegant but tired. Emily, she greeted me warmly. I have to apologize for being late. I just flew in from the most bizarre Christmas Eve party in Connecticut. My pulse didn't even twitch. Oh. What happened? You won't believe this, she sighed, sitting down. The hostess, Margaret Carter, same last name as yours, funny coincidence, promised an elaborate homemade dinner. But when we arrived, the kitchen was empty. She ended up serving delivery pizza on fine crystal. I kept my face neutral. That sounds chaotic. It gets worse, Victoria said. She spent the entire evening bad-mouthing her older daughter. Said she was unstable, unreliable, unemployed. I've never seen anything like it. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo someone had taken at the party. Pizza boxes stacked on an expensive mahogany table, my mother's forced smile, Sarah trying to salvage the evening. Victoria shook her head. It was the most unprofessional event I've ever attended. I smiled slightly. That must have been awkward. You have no idea, she said. Then she straightened. But enough about that. Let's talk about your company, Stellar Events. And that's when everything started to unravel in the most spectacular way. Victoria's assistant led me through glass doors into a conference room that screamed power and precision. Minimalist design, walls of frosted glass, a 12-seat oak table gleaming under soft lighting. The kind of room where deals were born, or buried. She gestured for me to sit, and I placed my laptop on the table, my nerves hidden under years of practice. Victoria entered moments later, holding a coffee she probably hadn't had time to enjoy. She smiled, polite, composed. "Emily, I've looked forward to this." "So have I," I said, meeting her gaze. She nodded to her assistant, who dimmed the lights. "Let's see what you've got." I started my presentation. Photos of our events flashed across the screen, galas that looked like fairy tales, corporate summits that felt like cinematic experiences. My voice stayed steady, professional. When the video reel ended, I clicked to the final slide. Stellar events, experience, elevated. Silence stretched for a moment before Victoria leaned back in her chair. "That," she said finally, "was exceptional." My shoulders relaxed slightly. Then she added, "You know what's funny? I already knew your work. Stella handled the Renwick Foundation Gala last year, right?" I nodded. "We did. I was there. It was the most flawless event I've attended in years. I remember thinking, whoever ran this operation should be running mine." That was when I allowed myself to breathe. Victoria smiled. "Emily, I think Pinnacle and Stella could create something incredible together. But before we sign anything," she reached into a folder, "there's something I need to clarify." She slid a thin document across the table. My name was at the top, but beneath it, minority investor, Charles Carter. My heart froze. My father's name. I blinked, rereading it twice. "There must be a mistake," I said quietly. Victoria looked at me, curious. "That's your father, isn't it?" "Yes," I managed. "But I didn't know he'd invested." She frowned. "Interesting. He contributed a significant amount 2 years ago through a holding company, Carter Strategic. It was presented as a private equity investment. He requested no voting rights, no board seat. Just said, 'She'll need this one day.'" I sat back, my pulse thundering in my ears. 2 years ago, I was struggling to scale my company. Banks kept rejecting me for expansion loans. I'd assumed the anonymous investor who came through last minute was a silent angel fund. I'd never connected the dots. My father had quietly saved my company. Victoria gave a small smile. "I hope that's not an issue. It's actually one of the reasons we were interested. We admire investors who back founders personally, not just financially." I swallowed hard, forcing composure. "No issue," I said softly. "Just surprising." The meeting continued, but my thoughts spun. All these years, I'd assumed my father was silent because he didn't care. Turns out, his silence had been his way of speaking. When Victoria finished outlining the terms, exclusivity clauses, brand integration, marketing rights, I agreed to everything we'd already negotiated. She stood and extended her hand. "Congratulations, Emily. Pinnacle is officially your biggest client." I smiled, shaking her hand, feeling the weight of everything that had led here. And then, as we walked toward the elevator, she said casually, "You know, your mother was right about one thing." I paused. "Which one?" "She said her eldest daughter never gives up." I froze. "You talked to my mother?" "She called me the morning after that dinner," Victoria said carefully. "She wanted to apologize for the chaos. But she also wanted me to know that she believed in you, even if she'd never told you to your face." I laughed quietly, half in disbelief. "That doesn't sound like her." She said, and I quote, "Emily always does things her own way. It used to frustrate me. Now I think it's her gift." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger when I thought of my mother. Just distance, and maybe the faintest spark of understanding. That evening, I sat in my hotel room staring at the contract. The deal was done. Pinnacle would bring in millions in annual revenue. Stellar Events was officially in the big leagues. But I couldn't stop thinking about my father's hidden signature buried in those old investment documents. I picked up my phone and called home. He answered on the second ring. "Emily." His voice was warm but cautious. "Hi, Dad." A pause. I saw the news release. Congratulations. You invested in me, I said quietly. Through Carter Strategic. He sighed. I wondered when you'd find out. Why didn't you tell me? Because your mother would have called it favoritism, he said softly. And because I wanted you to succeed without feeling like you owed anyone. The silence stretched, filled with years of unspoken things. Finally, he added, you built something incredible, Emily. I just helped keep the lights on. Tears stung my eyes. Thank you. You don't need to thank me, he said gently. You earned every inch of this. But if you ever want to come home, not as a caterer, not as the help, but as my daughter, my equal, dinner's on me. I ended the call and sat there for a long time, watching the city lights blur through the window. For the first time, the phrase, family business, didn't feel like a curse. It felt like something that could finally mean respect. And that was the night I realized. Success wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was right to believe I could do this on my own. Still, part of me smiled knowing that somewhere in the numbers, my father's silent faith had been woven into my story all along. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner. Not a party. Not a spectacle. A dinner. The guest list was short. My parents, my sister Sarah, and a few close friends. It wasn't about showing off. It was about closing a chapter. My team from Stellar Events catered it because I no longer cooked for family gatherings. That was a boundary I'd never cross again. As my parents and Sarah sat at my dining table being served by my employees, people who now called me boss, the role reversal wasn't lost on anyone. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I raised my glass of wine. Before we eat, I said, I just want to be clear about something. They all looked at me. My mother's eyes flickered with that old mix of pride and discomfort. Success doesn't need permission, I said softly. Self-worth doesn't require validation. And respect is non-negotiable. Silence. Then, to my surprise, my mother nodded. She looked older, softer. You're right, she said quietly. You always were. I didn't expect that. Sarah cleared her throat. Actually, Emily, she began carefully, there's something I've been meaning to ask. My defenses went up immediately. What's that? She smiled nervously. My PR firm, remember Horizon Collective? We've been restructuring. I stepped back as partner for a while. She hesitated. But now, we're focusing on brand authenticity campaigns. And Stellar Events. Well, you're everywhere. You've built something that people genuinely trust. I blinked. Sarah, are you asking me for work? She laughed, embarrassed. Not exactly work. I'm asking if Stella might consider Horizon for your next PR campaign. I'd still go through the regular pitch process, no special treatment. It was surreal. The same sister who once mocked me for playing caterer, now wanted to represent my company. For a moment, I didn't answer. Then I said, submit a proposal like everyone else. Her smile was small but real. Already done. I didn't say it out loud, but the truth hit me then. We were finally meeting as equals. Not as the perfect daughter and the failure, but as two women who'd both stumbled their way toward humility. Dinner continued. The food was impeccable. Braised short ribs, truffle potatoes, hand-rolled pasta, and a dessert bar that looked like edible art. My parents were quiet, almost reverent. When my staff cleared the plates, my father leaned forward. Emily, he said, your mother has something she's been wanting to share. My mom gave him a look that said I wasn't ready yet, but he just smiled gently. She sighed, then reached into her purse and handed me an envelope. I wrote this a while ago. I wasn't sure I'd ever give it to you. I took it but didn't open it. What is it? Read it later, she said. After dessert. After everyone left, I sat alone in the kitchen surrounded by flickering candles and the faint smell of rosemary and wine. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I finally opened the letter. Emily. I started therapy 4 months ago. I thought I was doing it because I wanted to understand why I couldn't stop trying to control everything. But really, I did it because I wanted to understand why I lost you. For years, I mistook love for management. I thought being a good mother meant steering my children toward what looked successful. I didn't see that you were already succeeding, just not in ways I understood. The night you left home, I told your father you'd be back within a month. You never came back. And that was the moment I realized I didn't know my own daughter anymore. I'm sorry for every time I said your work didn't matter, for every dinner where I introduced you as Sarah's sister, instead of Emily Carter. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment, but I was only projecting my own. If you're willing, I'd like to start again. This time, not as a mother who manages, but as a woman who's learning to listen. Love. Mom. I read it twice, then pressed the paper against my chest. It didn't erase the past. But it was a beginning. The next morning, I arrived at Stella's headquarters, a space filled with light, flowers, and that faint smell of espresso and ambition. On my desk was a stack of mail, as usual. But one envelope stood out, heavy cream-colored paper with a gold seal. Inside was a glossy magazine. The headline read, "From Family Failure to Forbes Feature, How Emily Carter Redefined Success." It was Forbes. And the byline? Written by Olivia Grant. The same journalist who'd written a viral piece 2 years earlier titled, "The Illusion of Self-Made, When Nepotism Wears a New Dress." That article had nearly destroyed my reputation. I sat down, breath caught between disbelief and awe. This time, Olivia's words were different. In an era obsessed with overnight success, Emily Carter reminds us that true power comes from persistence, not privilege. She built stellar events from nothing. No family money, no shortcuts, just grit, grace, and a refusal to stay small. Her story is not revenge. It's repair. For the first time, someone in the media had gotten it right. I exhaled, smiling. Repair, I whispered. Exactly. Later that week, I hosted an internal celebration at Stella. We just signed 3 new corporate clients and hit 100 full-time employees across 5 cities. As I looked around the conference room, my team laughing, glasses clinking, music humming in the background, I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who served appetizers in her mother's dining room, hoping for approval she'd never get. The one who thought success would finally make her feel enough. Now I realized, I'd been enough all along. That night, I went home and stood by my window, watching the city shimmer below. I thought about the line from my mother's letter, "I'd like to start again." And maybe, for the first time, I was ready to let her. The following Sunday, I drove out to my parents' house. Not the mansion where I'd once been humiliated, but their smaller lakeside home where they'd recently moved. My mom opened the door. Her eyes were tired but warm. "Emily," she said softly. "Hi, Mom." We hugged. Not stiffly, not out of duty, but like 2 people who'd finally stopped pretending they were at war. Inside, Dad was setting the table. Sarah was already there, pouring coffee. And just like that, we had dinner again. No staff, no formality, no unspoken judgment hanging over every bite. Just family. Halfway through, Sarah looked at me and said, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I smiled. Every day. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm just glad we got here anyway." Dad nodded. Better late than never. We laughed, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. A week later, I stood on stage at a women's leadership conference, giving the keynote address. The room was full, over 1,000 people, all waiting to hear how I turned my family disaster into a thriving business. I smiled into the microphone. I used to think success was something you chased until other people saw it. Now I know success is what happens when you stop asking for permission to exist. The audience went silent, the good kind of silence, the one that means they feel it too. I continued. "Your value doesn't decrease because someone else can't see it. You don't have to dim your light to make others comfortable. And you don't need anyone's approval to be proud of who you are. They applauded, a rising wave of sound that filled the auditorium. But even as I smiled and thanked them, I knew this moment wasn't about the applause. It was about the girl who once cried in a hotel room on Christmas Eve, wondering if she'd ever be enough. She was. She always had been. After the conference, I walked outside into the golden afternoon light, phone buzzing with messages and congratulations. One caught my eye. From Sarah. Proud of you, Em. Also, we got the stellar PR contract. Official today. I grinned. Of course you did. That night, I sat by my window again. The same view, different woman. A woman who had learned to build peace where there once was pain. I thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the silence, the rebuilding, the forgiveness. And I realized, it had all led here. I turned on my camera to record a message for my channel. My next chapter life stories moment. Hi everyone, Emily here, I began softly. If you've followed my story from the beginning, you know it started with a dinner that went horribly wrong. But what I've learned since then is that sometimes the things that break you open are the same things that set you free. I paused, letting that sink in. I spent years trying to earn respect from people who only saw what I wasn't. Now, I live for the people who see who I am. I smiled at the lens. So if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt invisible, I hope my story reminds you of this. You don't have to be chosen to be worthy. You just have to choose yourself. I raised my glass, not wine this time, but sparkling water, because clarity felt better than celebration. Your story matters. And maybe, just maybe, someone needs to hear it. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to choose yourself over family expectations. If this story resonated, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe on channel Next Chapter Life Stories. Because on this channel, we don't shrink to fit old versions of ourselves, we expand. I smiled one last time. Remember, I said softly, you're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Know your worth, and then add tax. The screen faded to black. And for once, I didn't feel like I was closing a chapter. I felt like I'd finally started a new one.